Hello guys, welcome to the next session of developing e-commerce application from scratch using Angular and Spring Boot. In the last session we discussed on how we can add product search bar on a show product details page. So in this feature what we were doing is we were looking into how we can add this particular search bar on a home page, and same search bar is added on the show product details page. So this show product details page is basically designed for admin only. So in this page admin will be able to see all the products which are there in the database, and this is the reason because there might be multiple products. So if admin wants to search any particular product, then admin will be able to search that product with the help of this search bar. And similarly on the home page, if user want to search any specific product, or maybe if user want to search with some search keywords, then user will be able to use this particular search bar. So we have completed this particular feature in the last session itself. Now if I just take you to the notes, over here we have listed some features. So over here we have listed some features on which we are going to work on. So this particular feature we have completed in the last session itself. Now the next feature that we are looking into is adding product to the cart. So this is really very important feature that we are going to add into our application, and obviously you must be knowing what is meaning of this particular feature. So whenever user is browsing any product, if user wants to add that particular product into a cart, then what we will be doing is we will be providing one button maybe next to the buy now button. So that button will be something like add to cart button. So whenever user will click on that button, then that particular product will get added to his or her cart. So this is the functionality that we are going to develop under this particular feature. Now again, there are multiple things to take care to implement this feature. So there are few things that we have to handle at the back end, and then there are few things that we have to handle at the front end. So in this session, let's focus on how we can complete the backend part, and maybe in the next session we will see how we can complete the UI part. Now if I just take you to the IntelliJ, the very first thing that we have to do is we have to create one entity class. So what are the different properties in that entity I will just explain you in a moment. So let me just do one thing. Let me just first of all create one class inside the entity package, and let me just give the name as cart to that particular class. This cart is entity class, so obviously we have to give some annotations like @entity and @cart, and then we just need three different properties. First property is pretty obvious property, which is a ID. So let me just use private integer, and let me just make it as a cart ID, something like this. Then this property, like this cart ID, we just want to generate automatically. So we have to first of all use @ID, so that we can tell Spring Boot that this particular property is primary key of the table. So we have to use @ID, and then we just need to use generated value, and strategy will be the auto. So let me just use strategy will be the auto, something like this. So cart ID will get automatically generated. Now the next property that we want is we want to store the product, because obviously if we are adding the product to the cart, then we want those product details, right? So that is the reason we just require private, then which product, and you can just give any name. I'm just giving product to this. And again, there should be some relationship between the cart table and product table. So that relationship will be the one-to-one relationship, because one cart ID will be associated to only one product, right? So that is the reason we just need to use one-to-one association. So let me just use one-to-one as an annotation on top of the this particular product property. And similarly, the third property that we want is we want user details, because we want cart ID, then we want associated product, and then we want who have added that particular product into a cart. So we want the user details as well to be stored. So that is the reason we just need to use private user, and you can give it as a user, something like this. And again, obviously one cart ID will be added only by one, one cart ID will be associated with only one user. That is the reason we have to use one-to-one association in this. Now we just need to generate the getters and setters. So let me just do one thing. Let me just try to generate getters and setters for all of these three properties, and now let me save these changes. Now the next thing that we want is we want to just create three different classes. First one will be controller for cart controller, then second one will be for a cart service, and then third one will be a interface for this cart DAO. So let me just add quickly all these classes. So in a controller package, let me just add cart controller, and let me just use annotation as @rest controller, something like this. Then inside the service package, let me just add cart service. So let me just use cart service, something like this. And then let me just use annotation @service on top of it, something like this. And similarly, let me just add one interface in a DAO package. So let me just use interface, and let me just give it as a cart DAO, something like this. And on this we just need to use one annotation that is called as a repository, something like this. Now to work on the DAO, what we just want is we just want to use extends, and we just need to use CRUD repository, because we are using CRUD repository throughout these sessions. So we have to extend our DAO interface with the CRUD repository interface. So we have to give CRUD repository. Then we have to specify two different arguments. First one will be, let's suppose, integer, and then second one will be the entity class, something like this. Now why I'm just using integer over here? Because in our class, if I just go to our cart entity class, if you just see, we have the ID, and this particular ID is mandatory, and the type of this ID is an integer. That is the reason I'm just using integer over here. Let's suppose if you have long type, or if you have any different type, you have to specify that particular type over here. Now we are done with the cart DAO. The next thing that I'm just going to do is I'm just going to come to the cart controller, and over here what I just want is I just want to create one API. Maybe let's suppose add to cart, something like this, and that API will take one parameter which will be the product ID, and that product ID we will add to the cart. So let me just create one, let's suppose public void, well, let me just create one method, let's suppose public void add to cart, something like this. And then over here we have to just specify different parameters. So let me just go to the product controller maybe, and let me just first of all use, okay, so we have to just use this particular annotation, and similarly we just have to specify the mappings as well. But as of now, let me just use this particular annotation, that is pre-authorize, and we have to specify on which role we just want to allow this API to be used. So I just want this particular API to accessible only to the users. That is the reason we have to give user over here. So let me just copy this and let me just paste it over here. Then we have to use which mapping do we have. So we might be having the post mapping, or maybe put mapping, or maybe get mapping. And in some cases, if delete operation is there, then we have the delete mapping as well. And there are few more, but these are the mappings which are most probably gets used. So in our case, maybe we can use get mapping as well, because we don't have anything to send from a body. So we can easily use a get mapping. So let me just use get mapping, and then we have to just specify like path. So my path will be, let's suppose, add to cart, and then we want to give a slash, and then we require one path variable. So path variable will be something like product ID, something like this. Now this particular path variable we have to use as a method parameter. So we have to just use @path variable, and then name is equals to the product ID, exactly same that we have used over here. Then we have to give the type of the parameter, which will be the integer, and then we have to give one variable name, something like this. So in my case, I will keep the variable name as a product ID, something like this. The next thing that we want is we just want to create or inject this service over here. So let me just use private, and let me just use cart service, and let me just give the name as a cart service, something like this. And now let me just use @AutoWired. Now let me just go to the cart service class, and inside this we just again want to create one method. So let me just use public void. So as of now I'm just keeping return type as void only. In a moment, maybe if required, we will just change it. And let me just give the name as a add to cart, and let me just take one parameter integer product ID, something like this, product ID, and then we have to just provide some method body. Now over here what we just want is, first of all we just want to inject the cart DAO. So let me just inject private cart DAO, something like this, and then let me just use @AutoWired, something like this. And then what we just want is, first of all we have the product ID, so we just need to fetch all the product details, because we have only ID but we want to fetch all the product details. So again, for this what we can just do is we can just directly use product DAO over here. So inside this product DAO, with the help of this product DAO, we can just find required details. So let me just do one thing, let me just inject product DAO over here. So let me just use product DAO and product DAO, something like this, and we should be using the @AutoWired. And then next thing that we want is, first of all we just want to use product DAO dot find by ID, and then we just want to pass the ID over here, something like this. Now it will return us one product, so we have to just store it into a product, something like this. And over here it is giving us the error, because find by ID basically returns us the optional, and that is the reason we have to just use .get, something like this. Obviously we have like many different ways to handle it, but I'm just keeping it as simple as possible. But there are multiple ways. So instead of this .get, we can just use, or else throw as well. Maybe we can throw the exception if that product ID is null. But I'm just right now at this moment I'm not worrying about it. I just want functionality to be implemented. So that is the reason I'm just keeping it as simple as possible. So over here what I will just check is product not equals to null, something like this. So we don't want our product to be null, because if product is null then we should not add that to the cart, right? So that is the reason we are just adding that particular condition. The next thing that we want is we want the user details as well. So over here if I just go to the project, so previously what we did is we have created one service. Maybe if I just take you to the JWT, okay, so let me just do one thing. If I just take you to the JWT service, so over here we have the JWT util. So let me just do one thing, let me just try to find it out. Okay, so instead of this what I can just do is I can just go to the order service, because in the order service we have used that, like we have used a logic to retrieve the user details. Yes, so over here if you just see in the JWT request filter, we have one property that is called as current user, which returns us the ID of the current user, like the ID of the user who is currently making the request, or maybe who is currently logged in. So we can just use something like this. So let me just go back to my cart service. Over here what I just want is JWT filter, JWT request filter dot current user. So let me just store it in a string, username, something like this. And then we want the user DAO as well. So let me just inject it. So let me just use private user DAO, and name will be the user DAO, something like this. And we have to use @AutoWired. And then over here what we just want is we just want to fetch the user details. So let me just use user DAO dot find by ID, and then we have to pass my username over here, and then we just need to store it into a object, something like this, and again it will give us the error because find by ID returns an optional, so we have to get it, we have to retrieve that object with the help of .get method, something like this. Now one more thing that we can just do is we can just add one more check over here. We don't want to make the request if username is null, then we don't want to make the request. Then we can just add the condition like if username not equals to null, then and only then we just try to find the user. So let me just do it something like this. Now over here inside if, we can add one more condition, if product is not equals to null and user not equals to null. So okay, so over here we are not be able to access the user. The reason is we have added or declared that user inside the if condition. So what we can just do is we can just try to do something like this, so that we will be able to access this user outside of this if condition. So we can just check if user is not equals to null. So we have two different conditions, product should not be null and user should not be null. If like product and user having some values, then and only then we will add it to the cart. So this is the intention behind adding these particular conditions. Now we have the product details and we have the user details. The next thing that we can just do is we can just add the we can just create the cart object and we can just add it to the database table. So again, one more thing that I can just do is if I just go to the cart.java. So over here what I can just do is I can generate the constructor, I can generate the parameterized constructor. So this will help me to create the object easily. So that is the reason I'm just generating the constructor. So over here I'm just selecting two different properties. First is product and user. Cart ID I'm not selecting because cart ID is not, I will not provide the cart ID. Cart ID will be provided by the Spring itself. So that is the reason I'm just not going to select it. So to create the constructor, I'm just selecting two different properties like product and user. And now let me click on the OK and constructor will get generated. Now let me just come back to the service, and over here what we just want is we just want to use cart is equals to new cart, and then over here we are getting the error because we have to pass the parameter. So first parameter will be the product object and then second parameter will be the user object, something like this. And now cart object is created. Now what we just want is we just want to use cart DAO dot save, and then we just have to save like cart object, something like this. And now over here it is giving us the error. So let's see what is the error that it is giving. So over here it is giving us the error like it type s of the parameter s within its bound should extend. Okay, so what over here it is doing is, let me just go to the cart DAO first, and over here if I just go to the cart, and maybe what we can just do is we can, I think I have done some mistakes. Okay, so over here what the mistakes that I have done is I have like first of all, first parameter should be the cart class and second parameter should be the integer, something like this. So this is how we just need this cart DAO to be extended with the CRUD repository. Now let me just go to the service and the error should be resolved. Now yes, it is working as expected, like we don't have any error. So lastly what we just want is we just require to return something. So what we will just do is whatever we will save the details, we will return those details, because if you just take a look to the definition of save method, what it does is it basically saves the object in a database table, and whatever details that it has already saved, those details it returns us as a result. So what we can just do is we can just directly write return in front of it, something like this. Now over here we are trying to return the cart object, but we have provided void over here. So we can just remove the void and we can just place cart, something like this. And again we are getting some error at the like last curly bracket, because over here also we have to add the return statement, because if at all this particular if condition doesn't work, then we can directly return the null, something like this. Now let me save these changes, and now let me just come back to the cart controller. So let me just come back to the cart controller, and over here what we just want is we just want to store cart service dot, then we have to just use add to cart, and then we have to pass product ID, and this particular cart service returns us the cart object, so we can directly write return in front of it. And again obviously we will get the error because we have used void over here, so we can remove void and we can just directly write cart in front of it, something like this. Now let me just save these changes, and let me just first of all open the MySQL workbench before trying to run this particular project. So let me just try to use MySQL workbench, and let me just try to log in. And over here we have our e-commerce database. So now over here we have these particular tables at this moment. So let me just do one thing. Let me just try to restart the application, and let's see what are all the different tables that gets newly generated after adding this particular logic. So now my application is started successfully. If I just go back to the MySQL, and if I just try to refresh the schema, so if I just click on refresh all, then we are able to see one new table that is called as a cart table. And if I just click on the, if I just try to select the rows, then we have very first column that is cart ID, then we have product ID, and then we have username. So these are the three different columns that are created. Now the next thing that we can just do is we can just directly try to add some, we can just directly try to use this API, and we can just directly try to add some products to the cart. So what we have to just do is, first of all, now one thing that we have to keep in mind is we must have to log in as a user in order to use this particular API, because if you just see, we have added the condition to make this API to accessible only to the users. So we have to log in with the user, then we want to use that JWT token, and then and only then we will be able to use this add to cart API. So how we can just do is, if I just go back to the project, and first of all let me just find out the API to log in. So if I just go to the controller and user controller, then okay, not a user controller, let me just go to the JWT controller. So we have /authenticate as an API. So if I just go to the localhost 9090, if I just use localhost 9090 / and let me just paste /authenticate, which is my API, then this is the post mapping, and we have to pass two different things. So we have to pass username and password. So let me just first of all try to pass the username. So if I just go to the JWT request, then we have to pass the username, something like this. So we have to pass it as a JSON, and then we have to pass the user password as well. So let me just copy it and let me paste it over here. So I have created one simple account which is having the username as A and password is also A right now. So let me just click on the send button. Let's see what happens. So yes, we got the JWT token. This JWT token, what we have to do is we have to just copy, and let me just click on new tab, and over here what we have to just do is we have to just go to the authorization, or not authorization, headers, and then over here what I can just do is I can just maybe uncheck all this, and we can just add one more authorization, which is one more header which is authorization, and then we have to use bearer as a text. So we must have to type the bearer, then we have to give a space, and then we have to paste our JWT token. Now the next thing that what Next thing that I want is I want to use localhost 9090, and then we have to give the API that we have just created. So if I just go to the cart controller, so we have created this particular API which is add to cart. So let me just copy it and let me paste it over here. And then what we have to do is we have to pass one parameter, like one path variable or path parameter, which is the product ID that we want to add it into a cart. So again, we have to just find out the valid product ID. So right now, let me just go to the database MySQL Workbench, and then let me just go to the product table. Let me just find out what are the different product IDs that we have. So we have multiple product IDs. So let's suppose if I'm using this 35 as a product ID, so we have to just add the 35, something like this, and it will be the get operation only. Now let me just click on send. Let's see what happens. So over here, what we are getting is we are just getting some exception. Let's see what that particular exception is saying, or maybe we can just try to resolve it. So if I just go to the run, then over here we are not able to get any error. So let me just try to clear it, and then let me just do one thing. Let me just again try to send, or maybe what I can just do is I can just check all these headers which are required, and then let me just try to send it again. Yes, so this time, like after checking all the headers, what I got is I just got some response, and these are all the things that I have, these are all the things that I have got as a response. But again, I don't want to check it in a response because it will be it is very difficult to identify all the details in the response only. But what I can just do is I can just go back to the database, and then over here I can just try to select star from cart. Then over here we are able to see cart ID, which is 74, and that is automatically generated. Then product ID is the 35, and logged in user ID. So I was logged in with the username A, so maybe we can just try with better name, but as of now I am just logged in with the username A. That is the reason we are getting A over here. So we are able to store all the details like cart ID, then we are able to store the product ID, alongside we are able to store the username as well. So this particular API that we have created is working as expected, and we are able to get expected output. So these are only backend changes, and we have completed all those package changes. In the next session, we will see how we can utilize this particular API that we have created, and how we can try to give add to cart functionality from UI side as well. So these particular changes we will do in the next session. So I hope you got an idea around how we can add product to a cart and how we can make related backend changes. And if you still have any questions, let me know into a comment section. I will try my best to help you out in that case. And I hope you enjoyed this session, and I'll see you in the next session.